I have yet again rearranged my office. So welcome back to my channel. This is Cass from whatcassread, and I am here today to do the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag, everybody's favorite tag. I feel like every single time I come on, I have like a new way that I'm filming. So yet again, I'm still playing and testing out with filming. But what a better way to test it out than on the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. So I've got the questions on my screen over here, and I really couldn't fit like one book per question. There's too many books. I have read, I think like 77 books so far this year. By the end of June, I think my count was like pretty close to 80. So I just have too many to mention, which June didn't wind up being a very, very big reading month for me. And I still have to film my June wrap up. I still have to do all the things. So all of that explanation will come later, but let's get into the Mid-Year Book Freakout. Okay, so question number 1 is, what is your favorite book of the year so far? And I don't know why we start with this question every single time. Because I couldn't tell you right off the bat, but I think I have it. This was the one book that I did grab off of my shelf. And I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable and confident saying that Daughter of Smoke and Bone is my favorite book of the year so far, for a multitude of reasons. So Daughter of Smoke and Bone, I picked this as my favorite book of the year for a couple of reasons. Number 1, there are specific characters in here that I absolutely fell in love with, and I'll get to them later on in the questions. But also, this book has been sitting on my shelf for years, like 4 or 5 years at this point, and I finally picked it up, and it just reminded me of all the reasons why I love Laini Taylor as an author and why she is simply just unparalleled in terms of fantasy writing and fantasy romance. If you love kind of the mixture of a unique world plus a wonderful romantic plot, which is where I'm at right now, Laini Taylor is your gal. So, Daughter of Smoke and Bone follows a young woman named Karu, who is an art student in Prague, Czech Republic. And at the beginning of the story, there are these different doors that have been appearing in the human world, like all over the world, that have this mysterious mark on them, and no one really understands why. Karu, she actually grew up with a family of chimera and has been doing these like art, but also not art. I don't want to get into spoilers. These dealings with these chimera as like a human representative for them. So she has noticed that these marks have been popping up all over the place, and then it turns into this whole big thing. And the way that it winds through the history of this world, the characters that we get introduced to, the romance that we get involved with, it's too much. It's too much that I just love it. So I feel pretty good about naming that as my favorite book of the year so far, but I've read some really good ones. I've had a lot of 5 stars, and maybe I should also do a video on my 5 stars. There's just been a lot though. I don't know how long that video would take to film. There's a lot. Okay, now question number 2 does feel easier to me. This is, what is the best sequel that you've read this year? And I have 2. Because I can't pick. The first one would be The Girl in the Tower, written by Catherine Arden. This is book number 2 of the Winter Night trilogy. Another set of books that I had on my shelf for years. And the beginning of the year for me was really all about like catching up to some of those series that have been sitting on my shelf for a long, long time. And I decided to pick up The Girl in the Tower because I was like, you need to just finish this series already. And I had a lot of misgivings about picking up this book for a long time because the way that its first book, The Bear and the Nightingale, made me feel, I didn't know if it could be replicated in a sequel. And Catherine Arden is another author that just made me realize that she knows what she's doing. She knows where it's at. All of the magical feeling that I felt at the end of The Bear and the Nightingale, she didn't let up. She actually ramped it up. And I didn't know that that would be possible. So, The Bear and the Nightingale / The Girl in the Tower, this follows a young woman named Vasilisa. Book number 1, we follow her as she's growing up through the Russian wilderness. She is part of this pretty wealthy family, and they're like the governing family of this settlement in the wilderness. And so a part of her upbringing is just the adherence to like Russian folklore, the adherence to the spirits that are throughout the land and throughout the house, and then the infiltration of Christianity into her world really does shake things up. So by the time we start book number 2, she is a young woman. She's no longer a child, and she has left the setting of the wilderness, the woods, and has come to Moscow. So a lot of my misgivings were whether or not we could feel that same connection to the magic in Moscow. Catherine Arden simply just took care of that, no problem. And like I said, she ramped it up, and I finished the whole trilogy this year. My second favorite sequel is going to be Before They Are Hanged, written by Joe Abercrombie. Wow. This is book number 2 of the First Law trilogy. So I am taking part in the First Law along with Becca and the Books and the Catch-Up Book Club. And we read book number 1 and book number 2 this year. Book number 2, to me, was like exactly what I had needed. And I didn't even know it. It's probably like the biggest fantasy epic that I've been reading this year. I've been pretty slow on the fantasy books this year. I've just been not picking them up and not finishing them when I do pick them up sometimes. I had read the first book, The Blade Itself, before the club and then with the club. So that was like a reread. And I remember picking up the second book, Before They Are Hanged, and it's kind of one of those books where all of the characters come together for a brief moment in the first book, and then they end up having to disperse into their own quests in book number 2. And so that's basically the setup for like this magical fantasy world. And I was never bored. I was never bored with any of the POVs that we get and the POVs that we follow and all of their different storylines and all of their different quests, which is very rare for me to have that kind of connection with that many different quest plot lines in a single book. Usually there's like one plot line that I absolutely hate and I'm really mad that we have to follow that character. Didn't happen with this one. Plus, there were a lot more battle sequences. Like, pretty much, like, the whole second half of the book was a battle. And I had a great time. There were some character moments that really impacted me. I finished this book really fast. And I have to pick up book number 3. So, book number 3 for the live show, we're going to be doing that later on this month, actually. So I still have to pick that up, and I'm hoping to pick that up pretty soon, so that way I can have it all fresh in my head for the next live show that we do. Okay, question number 3 is, what is a new release that you really want to read but you haven't gotten to yet? So there's a couple, and then also, like, because I've sat on them so long, then you start seeing reviews, and then there's people that don't love it as much as like the hype that you had for it. But anyways, I have 4 books to talk about. So the first 3 are all romance. 2 are fantasy romance. 1 is just straight contemporary small town romance. So that one would be Reckless by Elsie Silver. The first half of the year was very pro Elsie Silver. I read the first 3 books in this series. This is what is it called? The Chestnut Spring series. That's what it's called. The books are right behind me. So book number 1 and 2 of that series, 5 out of 5 stars. Book number 3 ended up being a 4-star read for me. Ended up being a 4-star read for me. And as I've seen more reviews for book number 4, which just came out, I think last month in May, not as high of reviews, or it had more of like a love it or hate it kind of vibe. The Chestnut Spring series is a small town romance series where we follow a whole family of ranchers, and there's different brothers and characters and friends of the family that we end up following. So this book can't be read on its own. I mean, I guess you could, but there's a lot of context for the characters by the time we get to book number 4. And so the heroine is going to be the sister of our heroine in book number 1. And then our hero is a bull rider who has connections to our hero from book number 1. So I guess perhaps you could read book 1 and then book 4 if you just want to get those connections and see like the setup for our heroine, because that's really a lot of setup there. But then you're going to get into spoiler territory, because I have a feeling like all the characters that we've come to know and love are going to be featured pretty heavily in this book. So anyways, I have it checked out on my Kindle Unlimited. There's no reason why I shouldn't read this. I just have been very, very busy in the summertime, and I've been pretty lazy. Then the next one would be Fourth Wing, written by Rebecca Yarros. How many people have read Fourth Wing at this point? And I first wanted to read it because like there was so much hype into it. I mean, Book Talk went crazy for it. And then eventually it came over to BookTube, and it was like we hadn't heard a single bad review on it. And then because I haven't actually gotten to it yet, more BookTube reviews have come out that I don't know if you're anything like me, but I tend to trust my BookTuber friends more than I'm trusting Book Talk reviews, because I don't know them very well, and the reviews aren't very long. Like TikTok is just a small short form content kind of thing, whereas people who are sitting down and filming videos about Fourth Wing, some of them aren't having super great things to say about it, or they're just saying it's kind of average. So it's supposed to be Magical Dragon Rider Academy with a romantic subplot, and I just haven't, I mean, that should meet all of the criteria for me, but I just haven't picked it up. I do have it on Audible. I don't have a physical copy of it, so that was also the other thing. Like, after I had already spent the credit on Audible, people were saying that the audiobook wasn't great, which kind of breaks my heart, because the audiobook narrator, Teddy Hamilton, is like a big romance narrator. So I don't know. We'll see when I get to that one. The next one, which would be the last romance book for new releases, is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, written by Carissa Broadbent. This is the follow-up to The Serpent and the Wings of Night. So this is like the Crowns of Nyaxia series, written by Carissa Broadbent. It's a fantasy romance series involving vampire houses and what is my problem? I really should read this book because I loved the first one. It involves like vampire houses, but in this like fantasy world. And there was a contest in book number 1. And you know, basically by the time we get to book number 2, a lot of stuff has happened. There's like overthrow plot lines. There's vampires versus everybody else plot lines. I don't know what I'm sitting on. I loved book number 1. Haven't gotten to it yet. And then this new release I haven't gotten to, because also who has the time, is Malevolent 7, written by Sebastian de Castell. And I love Sebastian de Castell, one of my favorite authors. He came out with this one pretty recently, so it hasn't been out very long. And so I don't feel super bad about not getting to this one just yet. So my one and only anticipated release for the rest of the year is going to be Holly by Stephen King. I haven't been this hyped about a Stephen King book in a while. And this follows Holly Gibney, who gets her very own book. Holly Gibney is a character that we have met through the Mr. Mercedes Bill Hodges trilogy. That's the first time that we meet her. And she's popped up a couple of other times outside of the Bill Hodges trilogy, and now she's getting her own book. So we meet Holly Gibney. She is a neurodivergent character who ends up working for Bill Hodges' detective agency. By the time she gets her own book, a lot of stuff has happened, but she's definitely established herself more as a private detective. And so I really can't wait to see kind of like what the case is going to be, how this ties to her character. I'm super hyped for this one. So if you are also Stephen King fans and you're a fan of Holly Gibney, I cannot wait. I hope you all, if you are in that niche crowd, let me know. She's a character that I've loved for a long time. And I hope it's a good one. I really do. I'm so excited for her to get her own book. Oh, speaking of Hollies, wow. Biggest disappointment would have to go to the 2 Holly Black books that I read this year. Isn't that sad? That would be Book of Night. I talked about this in my Q1 stats video. And I also talked about the Stolen Heir, I think. But both of them were written by Holly Black. The Stolen Heir is a book in the Elfhame series. It's an Elfhame novel. We follow a character that we met at the end of the trilogy, Queen of Nothing. We met this character at the end of Queen of Nothing. So this was something that I had been looking forward to for a while. And I was one of those people that just fell into like the Elfhame, Cruel Prince fandom so deep. Like I fell into that for no good reason. It was just a book series that I fell in love with. And so when I finished it, I was really excited to see that we would have another character with kind of their own spin-off tale. And it wasn't very interesting. That was the sad part. It was very, very boring. It was basically a road story, a quest story, but we aren't back with the characters that I really grew to love. I even got the novella, How the King of Elfhame learned to hate stories. I even have that. And we meet with the Cruel Prince and eventually the Wicked King. And so I was hoping that we would see more of those characters. That's not the case. And while we do encounter our character from book number 3, Queen of Nothing, the point of view isn't from that character. It's supposed to be a duology. I DNF'd this one. No, I didn't DNF it. I just kind of trudged through it, which makes me so upset. And then I also had bad luck with Book of Night, written by Holly Black. This was Holly Black's first attempt at an adult fantasy, and she went the urban fantasy route. I personally have gripes with urban fantasy. It's just not a subgenre of fantasy that really works for me. And the main issue is because the characters usually use some type of really hot off the press topical references that just take me out of the story. And that's really the main flaw that I find with urban fantasy books. And that was the main flaw that happened for me when I was reading Book of Night. It was the fact that our main characters went to Target. And I was like, what? It completely pulled me out of the story of thinking about our characters going on a Target run. Some people might think that's fun. I personally, that doesn't work for me. So I DNF'd that one extremely fast. And after I DNF'd it, then I began to see more reviews of people talking about it. And there were quite a number of people who were extremely disappointed in that story. And that just made me feel really, really disappointed in the fact of am I not a fan of Holly Black? Is her magic for me only going to be within the Cruel Prince and the Elfhame original trilogy? I'm not sure. But at this point in time, it is. My biggest surprise but the first one that I want to talk about is Dolores Claiborne, written by Stephen King. That one came out of left field for me, and I ended up loving it, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So Dolores Claiborne is a standalone novel, but kind of related to the Stephen King universe and multiverse, and it takes place in this fictional island community off of the coast of Maine. And we follow this old woman who is currently, at the present time of this story, being held for questioning on her employer's death in the sheriff's office. And if you're going to read this book, listen to it on audiobook. I found it on Scribd. And it's the best way for me to have consumed that story because the whole story is told from her perspective. It's like a second person perspective where she is talking directly to the recorder in the sheriff's office, giving her statement, giving her perspective with her employer Vera's death. And it was awesome. Just it ended up being a really great slice of life, two old broads who find themselves toward the end of their lives, like having grown together through this employer-employee relationship, but relating on so many different things, scandals that happened in their small community, and what it was like for women in that time. I think it was like the 40s all the way through the 70s, and then by the time Dolores is giving her statement, I think it's about the 90s. It was really good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Biggest surprise. Some other wonderful delights for me were Again the Magic, written by Lisa Kleypas. It was a delightful surprise because this was my second Lisa Kleypas book. She is a historical romance author, very, very popular. And I wanted to get started on a Lisa Kleypas series. I wanted to fall in love with her. My first go around with Lisa Kleypas wasn't very successful. I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. So like I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. So I was very, very nervous to pick up my next Lisa Kleypas novel, which was Again the Magic. It can be read as a standalone, but it's kind of a prequel for one of her more well-known series called the Wallflower series. And so I was basically just reading it because I was like, I want to get to the Wallflowers and I kind of want to read things in order. And that was all the thought I gave to it. And I ended up giving that book a 5 out of 5 stars because it had so many wonderful tropes that I personally love. In particular, childhood best friends to lovers. I made a whole video talking about some of my favorite childhood best friends to lovers, and Lisa Kleypas, Again the Magic, stole my heart. It was swoony, it was romantic, super dreamy atmosphere and setting, and it was awesome. So, very, very big surprise. The other big surprise for me was the Mind F series written by S.T. Abbey. This was just like, I picked it up for funsies off of Kindle Unlimited, and it was a set of 5 novellas, dark romance, crime romance. It's about a serial killer who is our main heroine. Our heroine has this cool meet cute with the hero, but it turns out the hero is an FBI agent who is profiling her case. Like our FBI profiler is looking after her, the serial killer. And it was really fun. So that one took me by surprise. I finished that whole series. It's a series of 5 novellas. Each novella is around 100 pages, and they were read so quickly for me because each novella felt like its own episode of a crime TV show. Had so much fun with it. I was very, very surprised with how much I enjoyed that one. And then my last biggest surprise would be Praise, written by Sarah Kate. I think this one is a huge surprise because of just how sex positive it is, but also like the daddy kink was there and the daddy kink was real. And I didn't think that I would like that. It was an ex-boyfriend's dad taboo kind of romance, but I didn't really find anything taboo about it. And I had a really great time. It was less romance and more smut than I had initially anticipated. So just know that going in there. That's like a smutty time, not necessarily a romance time, but there's a very, very good romantic plot in there. So that's why it was a huge surprise for me. Favorite new author. If I had filmed this video at the beginning of June when I was planning on filming it and that I didn't wait as long as I did, my answer probably wouldn't be the same. But the way that I had written these questions out, at first my 2 favorite authors were Lorraine Heath, who was the author of the Lost Lords of Pembroke series. That just ended up being a series that I totally loved, a historical romance author. And she wrote about these 3 brothers that had very, very dark upbringings. And I know now that I need just a touch of danger in my historical romance novels, and Lorraine Heath really delivered that. The other author that I wanted to mention was Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan. If you're looking for emotional destruction, read Kennedy Ryan. Her books were so incredibly powerful. I read the Hoops trilogy from her, and I do plan on reading more Kennedy Ryan. It's just like the emotion and really the real life problems that her characters are going through hit very, very close to home. So if you're going to read her stuff, make sure you check out the trigger warnings before you go in. So that's why I'm kind of like waiting on my next Kennedy Ryan read, because I don't know when I'm going to be in the mood for just like total devastation. But then I wanted to highlight Lisa Kleypas. If I had filmed this video at the beginning of June like I had intended and not waited till the end of June, so it was like officially the mid-year point, I don't think I would have felt as strongly about Lisa Kleypas as I do now. Whereas like Lisa Kleypas, I ended up reading six books of hers by the beginning of June. And then June, I read 3 more Lisa Kleypas books. And just continuing on with her historical romance series, and a lot of these series follow along with different families, I didn't think she could make me fall in love with another family to follow along with, but she completely has. I've already finished the Wallflower series. Now I am eyeballs deep in the Ravenel series, and I have loved the Ravenels so much. It hurts how much I love these characters. So favorite new author is definitely Lisa Kleypas. She's for sure skyrocketed to like the most books of a single author that I've read this year. Okay, newest fictional crush. Well, all of the St. Vincents from Lisa Kleypas's books. Just all of the St. Vincents. I'm just going to throw that in there, okay? If you know, you know. But then there's also Phoenix Walker from The Words by Ashley Jade. He is the titular bad boy, enemies to lovers, very, very dark content, rock star romance. And it turns out I love a little bit of toxicity in some of my romances too, because I wouldn't say that was a healthy relationship, but where we started and where we ended up, Phoenix Walker is one of those characters for me, and I kind of like talking about him makes me want to reread this book. And then the other one would be Liam McKenzie in The Highlander, written by Kerrigan Byrne. I mean, I blame Outlander and Jamie Fraser for the beginning of my love for Highlander protagonists and the Highlander heroes, and so I got a really, really great one with Liam McKenzie. His nickname is the Demon Highlander. Yeah, I loved him a lot. He was my favorite. I don't know, because I've loved so many of the heroes in that series written by Kerrigan Byrne. The Victorian Rebels. Oh my gosh, that would have driven me nuts. The Victorian Rebels series. So like I said earlier in this video that I need just a touch of danger in my historical romance novels, Kerrigan Byrne gives it to you with the Victorian Rebels. Each one of our heroes has a very, very seedy past, and there's really, really great subplots of mystery and danger and intrigue. Okay, newest favorite character. I couldn't go a single video without a single mid-year wrap-up video for sure without bringing in non-human characters, because the non-human characters always get to me, and I'm talking about Brimstone from The Daughter of Smoke and Bone. He is our main chimera. He is like our secret key keeper, main chimera. I loved all of the chimera. But if I would epitomize all of the chimera into Brimstone, I keep knocking into my microphone, into Brimstone, I loved him. Newest favorite character. And then all of the Lost Lords of Pembroke were also favorite characters because they were so dark, so broody, so badass. If I said that like the Lost Lords of Pembroke series is for fans of fantasy that want to try some historical romance, because this would be like if the Starks got a happy ending, read the Lost Lords of Pembroke, all 3 of them. Rafe, Tristan, Sebastian. Like Rafe was super dark. Tristan was super swoony and like exuded charisma. And Sebastian had the mantle of responsibility with a tortured past. But Sebastian also had a childhood best friend to lover. Anyway, loved all of them. I couldn't pick a favorite. I loved all 3 of them. Now, question number 10, book that made you cry. Kennedy Ryan, long shot. If Kennedy Ryan doesn't make you cry, do you even have a heartbeat? And I say that in jest, but also like Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan deals with some super, super heavy topics about domestic abuse. And you have to be in the right mindset to read that book. On the other side of it, I read Jennifer Hartman, Still Beating. That book made me cry. It's a little bit more of a out there plot line, but it's a kidnapping story, and the two characters who were kidnapped and how they came out on the other side of the kidnapping. And that made me cry. Wow. There's a lot of things that those characters go through, but really I found the part that made me cry was more about their redemption of themselves, and how Jennifer Hartman handled that was super great. I kind of want to reread all of these as I'm talking about them. Books that made me happy. These ones were for two kind of similar reasons, but the first book that made me really happy was The Winter of the Witch, written by Catherine Arden. So this is the trilogy to the finale to the Winter Night trilogy. And it made me very, very happy with how she wrapped that up. For having such a deep-seated love for this main character, Vasilisa, and to see how her character ended up, I thought it was beautifully done. Just beautiful. Like the most appropriate ending to that trilogy that I could have ever hoped for. And then the other book that made me really happy was Tales from the Greatcoats, written by Sebastian de Castell. And that was just like nostalgia feels all over the place. That was a collection of short stories on the different greatcoats that we didn't quite follow. But all of it had a tie into our main Greatcoat series. And that's one of my favorite fantasy series. If you didn't know, Sebastian de Castell just gets me. My favorite book to film adaptation, I've only read one, and that was Daisy Jones and the Six. So by default, that wins this category. I actually still haven't watched the Amazon Prime series. I meant to, I just don't have time to watch TV. And then now I'm kind of like back on my BS and starting the next season of Sons of Anarchy, which really got me into like motorcycle romances. So that's what I've been watching. I haven't been watching Daisy Jones and the Six. Books that I need to read by the end of the year. So this would be two books that have just kind of been like sitting. Now these are the new books that are kind of like sitting there looming over my head that I need to read. And so that would be The Lost Metal, written by Brandon Sanderson. So that's the fourth and final book in the second era Mistborn. I really want to read that book by the end of the year so that I am completely caught up and can go back into Stormlight Archive. Literally everything that I have read from Brandon Sanderson has been like a winding, weaving journey to get me to Stormlight Archive. And so once again, I have one more book kind of like in between me and the next installment of, that would be Rhythm of War. So I want to read The Lost Metal by the end of the year. And then the next book would be The Scott Beds His Wife and the Duke with the Dragon Tattoo, both written by Kerrigan Byrne. I started my historical romance journey with Kerrigan Byrne and the Victorian Rebel series, but I haven't continued on with that. So I've only read up to book number 4, and this would be books number 5 and 6 in that series. So then I can just like continue on with that series. There's really nothing keeping me from reading it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. And the very, very, very final question would be the most beautiful book that I got this year, that I purchased this year. Let me actually go grab it from my shelves. Hold on. I did an unboxing of this book on my channel this year, and that would be Tress of the Emerald Sea. This was the book that I purchased through the Kickstarter campaign launched by Brandon Sanderson. And I mean, it is gorgeous. There's beautiful end pages. It's the faux leatherette that has wonderful artwork on the front. But then there is just so much beautiful artwork throughout the whole book. This gorgeous. And, you know, it came with this wonderful bookmark too. So this is easily, hands down, the most beautiful book that I got this year. I still haven't read it yet. Obviously, because I'm just behind on Brandon Sanderson, but oh my gosh, this is gorgeous. So easy question. No other books can compare to that book for this year. Oh, how long have I been filming for? 45 minutes. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to trim this video down. I think it's going to be a long video, but anyways, we have made it to the end. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me get another sip of water. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you for your patience while I basically didn't film through the month of June because I just got slammed with work. So I'm happy to be back filming. I'm still a little bit busy. It's summertime. It just kind of happens that way. So I will be posting this video and then getting my June wrap up sometime to you, hoping to do kind of like all of these mid-year videos. But the other thing is, if you've made it this far and you are interested in hearing this news, I have started a brand new channel, and that is just my name, Cass Burton. And I made the decision to like put all of my planner content into its own channel because I just, after thinking about it for a little bit, it just didn't make sense to me anymore to kind of put both planning and booktube stuff on this channel. And I didn't want to transform my booktube channel into like a lifestyle brand. It just didn't sit well with me. Like, I really wanted my booktube channel to still be booktube. So I'll go ahead and put the link for that below if you're interested in that. But of course, let me know what you thought of all of these books. There's so many books here that I had to talk about today. And I absolutely love the Mid-Year Book Freakout Tag. I've loved watching all of your versions of this tag as well. It's just a booktube staple, right? It's just a booktube staple at this point. Go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe. And you know how these videos end. I'll talk to you later. Bye.